Ready? 3, 2, 1.
We're already live.
Already?
This is Three Distinct Knocks. I'm David Riley,
I'm Nicholas Harvey.
and our guest tonight is...
Ryan Flynn.
Hi, Ryan. It's good to have you here. We'll be talking to Ryan in just a minute, but first, it's time for tonight's rant, which is going to be a little unusual because I haven't written it down, because I wanted to explain to our listener why we took an unexpected hiatus. But as usual, I'm going to take the long way around to explain.
But why'd you say listener? Like there's only one, like to that one person who listens.
Right. Well,
sorry, Mom.
sorry, Mom. Speaking of Mom. Many years ago, my mom had a fairly devastating stroke. It was a bilateral stroke, which she barely survived. And for the rest of her life, she was in a wheelchair, in part because her vision was unreliable. The brain's a really interesting thing. She would be laying in bed, for example, if there was striped wallpaper. When she would sit up, she'd get this real sense of vertigo because her brain wouldn't adjust for the positioning of her head. So she would see the stripes on the wallpaper going the wrong way. Or she'd be watching you as you talk to her, and all of a sudden your head would float away and you'd see her eyes moving away from you, but she was seeing your head move because the visual processing part of her brain had been badly damaged, which made it hard for her to walk. You don't think about those sorts of things. She lived for another 6 years, and by the time she passed away, we had just moved her to Massachusetts to be closer to me. She had resisted that for a long time, and because who wants to be closer to me? And she had another stroke, which was devastating. It paralyzed the left side of her body completely and affected her ability to swallow. And you don't think about it, but without the ability to swallow, that's pretty much the end game for people, if you're never going to get that back. And so I had a really good conversation with a palliative care doctor, and he said to me, really, your mom needs hospice care at this point. She needs a compassionate end-of-life plan. And there's 2 places I recommend. I don't remember the first place he recommends at all. But the second place he said was Overlook. And I knew Overlook because Overlook is the Masonic home in Massachusetts. Massachusetts runs one of the larger visiting nurses associations and has this really fantastic campus where there's everything from independent living to assisted living to full-on nursing care and rehab care, all on one campus. It's an amazing facility. And so because I knew about it and I had been there and I knew how great a place it was, I said, that's where I want my mom to go. And he said, okay, well, I'll call and see if they have a bed. Well, as soon as he walked out of the room, I called, and I will never forget this conversation. I called my friend, J.R. Roach, and I said, brother, I need a favor. I don't know how this works, but I need you to call whoever it is that makes these things happen and make this happen for my mom. And JR called, and I got a call back from the director of Overlook. I think it was less than an hour later, saying, this is the number you called, but I know we have a bed available. We'll hold it for your mom. We'll make all the arrangements. And my mom went to Overlook for hospice care, where she passed away. And just to give you a clue of what that experience was like, they took really good care of her and they took really good care of me. And after she passed away, the funeral director called me and said, I want you to know I've never had this experience before. When I went to pick up your mom's body, several members of the staff asked me to drive slowly off the property because they wanted to walk with the car to the edge of the property, because as long as she was on the property, she was their responsibility. And I found that really touching. I don't sound like it perhaps, but I am a Southern boy in some ways. And if you want to make friends with me, the best way to do it is to take care of the people I love. And when my mother needed the fraternity most, the fraternity was there for her. My mother was the daughter of a Mason, the widow of a Mason, and the mother of a Mason. And every Master Mason knows that we make promises about taking care of those people in our lives. And the fraternity kept its promise to my mom and earned my loyalty. So why did we have an unexpected hiatus? Well, on April 17th, my husband of 18 years had a massive heart attack. And for at least 5 days, it wasn't clear if he was going to live. He he spent the next month in a propofol-induced unconsciousness. Technically not a coma, but I don't know what the difference is. He was intubated and then had a tracheostomy. It was a big deal. And then there were numerous hiccups along the way where it was scary all over again. It was one of those things. I don't know how people, honestly, I don't know how people survive if they don't have family there for them to advocate for them. There were at least a couple of times when I firmly believe that Nathan would have been killed had a family member not been there to put the brakes on things and say, wait, that's not right. There's one moment in particular I remember where I screamed at an ER doctor. Sorry, but but he was wrong. And it took all my time, all my energy, staring the death of someone who is so much a part of the fabric of your life, seeing that, knowing that it's there, that it's a distinct immediate possibility, reduces your world from color to black and white and makes it a very small place very quickly. I had no time or attention for anything except him. I had no energy, literally no energy for anything that didn't involve him because all of me was tied up in trying to be there for him. Fortunately, we have an amazing network of friends. He has an amazing family. And we got through it. Nathan is live and well and still recovering to some degree, but he was at work today doing his thing. And what struck me along the way was the number of people that Nathan had praying for him. Now, I believe in an interventionist God. You can believe as you wish. But I believe that prayer makes a difference, not just in us, but in the world. And Nathan had Jews, Christians, Muslims, the generally confused praying for him. He had candles being lit in churches, and he had prayers being said in synagogues. He was being prayed for in as many languages as I can think of. And I really do think it made a difference. And many of the people who reached out to me and made insane offers to fly down from Boston and stay at my house to walk my dog while I was looking after Nathan, or to cook for me while I was working after Nathan, or who just called to let me vent for a couple of minutes, were members of my lodge who really reached out and were there for me at a moment when I didn't know I needed people, but I really needed people. And it made a big difference. Nick came and sat with me one evening at the hospital while Nathan was getting his dialysis. I couldn't be in the room for that. It's the fraternity was there for me and for Nathan. Again, it was a promise made and a promise kept. A friend of mine, a brother, is sometimes jokingly said that Freemasonry is a death cult, just not that kind of death cult. And what he means by that is that Freemasonry uses the imagery around dying, the knowledge of our mortality, to help us reduce the distractions of our lives to a minimum so that we think about what's really important. When Nathan was in the most danger, it was clear to me that was what was most important in my life is the people that I love. It was Nathan was the most important thing. The thought of losing him was terrifying. And we should all consider that at any moment we can lose the people that we love. So that's why we were on hiatus, is because I wasn't available. And that's why we're back, is because your prayers and my prayers were answered. And I want to thank all of you who reached out and who were kind to me, who were understanding, who were forgiving, and who helped me get through that. Well, Nathan get through that. But I especially want to say thank you to those of you who prayed, because it was all we could do and it made all the difference. Thank you. And that's the rant. And I'm never writing that one down, Nick, so don't even ask. And now we're going to completely change topics. Well, not completely, because art is about mortality and immortality on some level, right?
I don't know. I'm here to learn.
Well, they call artists immortals, right? Anyway, the immortal Da Vinci, right?
I didn't get that.
So we're going to be talking to the immortal Ryan Flynn, who I saw a quote that you are the most influential living Masonic artist in North America. Agree or disagree?
No. I think I've been given the opportunity to speak a lot more than other people on the topic, and I have a more academic approach to a lot of the stuff. But to say that I'm influential or more influential than any other artist out there is, I don't think is true. I may appeal to certain people, but other artists will appeal to an entirely different crowd. It doesn't really matter. The great thing about the arts is you're not really competing with each other.
That's, well,
Well,
I
mean,
no, I mean that because it's a perfect example is, if you look at reality TV and you see like all these shows where people are backstabbing each other and trying to just get an edge and winning, and then you look at some of the art-based ones, like I watch Face Off on the Sci-Fi Channel, where they're creating like special effects and makeups and stuff and doing all these sculptures. The big difference I've always noticed is they're actually helping each other through the process. They want them to succeed and then be fairly judged. I think that's kind of different with the arts as opposed to other things.
yeah, I can see that. I find it somewhat distressing, I guess. So my, I have friends and family. My mother-in-law lives in consignment shops, and they look for anything that looks Masonic to them. And they either bring it to me, buy it and bring it to me as a present, or send me pictures of it. And is this a Mason thing? Is a game that people play with me? And I've often joked that Masons will put a square and compasses and letter G on any tatty piece of trash. I had to self-censor there. Any tatty piece of trash available. But then I look back, and I don't know if it's because that which survives is that which is a better quality, or if it's that we used to do better by ourselves. But I look back at some of the stuff that was produced in previous ages, and it seems like Freemasonry had a greater appreciation for the arts, had a greater involvement with the arts, a greater life with artists. Is that fair, or am I just biased because what I see from the past has been censored by what's gotten thrown away?
Well, I'm going to say yes and no. So do I think that the square and compasses has become a logo as opposed to the Great Lights and Masonry in modern times? Absolutely, without question. One of my presentations I do around the country, I show a thong with it on, slapped on the front of it, because you can literally with a square and compass. And does that person really reflect his honor and duty to the craft by creating that? Maybe his level of it. But I completely agree with you. So to say that this is a new thing, however, I would disagree, because one has to remember that nowadays anybody with a computer can make something. and sell it on, Cafe Press or something like that. The people who had access to, or the brothers that had access to that in the 19th and 20th centuries, did the exact same thing just back then. The perfect example of that is your square apron. Square aprons were not really fashionable or very hard to find until the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when people could make square aprons over and over again and mass produce them. And then all of a sudden, they started making officers' aprons. Before the 1860s, it wasn't officers' aprons. Now there are, because, hey, I can make these for a dime a dozen and I can sell them and make money off of it. So the concept of Masonic regalia and slapping a square and compass on a lot of things isn't new. I do see that there's a lot more disrespect, in my opinion, in modern times. And that's kind of my reasoning for why I stay at the level I do with my own work. I refuse to go down that path. And it's hard not to if you try to make, living off the craft your profession, I guess, is the best way to do it. If I was to go full time and say I'm going to make a living off my Masonic art, for example, that's how I would put food on my table. So I would have to make anything that sells, just in order to feed myself. Which I'm not ratting on anybody who does it. That's their profession. I personally don't want to go down that route because I'm really trying to keep myself known as a Masonic artist and not a Masonic supplier or merchandise or merchant or whatnot. So, like I said, I'm not knocking anybody. I know there's a lot of people who make a lot of stuff, and you would call that merchandise and stuff. But I know their heart's in a good spot. But sometimes you got to pay the bills, and I get that. Just not my cup of tea.
No, some of it is useful, and I'm not putting down I draw the line at the thong. I'm not putting down some of the Masonic suppliers make things that are useful, and there's a place for the little giveaways that are not, they can be used as an inexpensive way of the worshipful master expressing thanks to a brother, or that I'm fine with all of that. But it just seems like that's where we stop more often than we used to. I don't see, for example, as many brothers. Maybe it's because modern technology has made it easier to replicate stuff, but I don't see as many brothers doing hand-painted trestle boards.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of why I started out down the road as a Masonic artist, because I didn't see that. And I was reading a book, which of course I don't remember of the title of, because I found it in a random room of a 17th century lodge room. We have, up in New Hampshire, we have the William Pitt Tavern, which is the actual tavern where our Grand Lodge was formed in the 1700s. So there's a little library in there, and my lodge had gone there to kind of be tour guides for a weekend, and I pulled this old book off the shelf, and the first chapter was the fine arts. And it was written in the 70s. And the exact words were like, the American Philistines and skeptics of Masonry have destroyed the column of beauty, or the pillar of beauty, by replacing all the furniture in their lodge with ready-made furniture, which is bought out of catalogs, and prints which are ordered from magazines. And I was like, took a picture, frame it, blow it up on the wall. But I do see that. I think you don't see that stuff a lot. And there's a lot of mindsets that aren't in existence anymore, like the idea of commissioning works. One of the ways I describe it in one of the presentations I do is it's very normal now for a lodge to come up to me and say, hey, we got Brother X who's been a Mason for 50 years. He's done so much for the lodge. We want you to do a patent for him or a certificate. We have a budget of $50. What can you do? Now, I will help out whenever I can, but there's different ways to think about that. So even if they were to spend $200, $300 on a gift to hand him, when you think about it, you're giving an elderly person a piece of paper and a frame. eventually that brother is going to pass away, and that frame is going to be stored somewhere, shoved in an attic, or passed on to a couple of people, and no one will see it except family members. Then eventually it will be forgotten. The idea of commissioning in honor of someone used to be something that Masonic lodges did quite often. So a work of art or a fixture of furniture would be purchased in the name of that brother with a plaque on it, or in some way honoring that person's sacrifice. So, for example, I've done a couple of large portraits in honor of someone who had been a chaplain for 60 years in the lodge. They, instead of giving him a patent or a certificate, they had a portrait of him done so they could put in the lodge to show Masons down the road, look at this guy's sacrifice. And that's kind of the big difference, is you're not only giving a gift to that one person, but you're giving that gift to every Mason in your lodge and the ones who are coming too. So it's a mindset that's kind of been knocked out of society, and I wish it would come back a little bit, because if you're really honoring someone for 50 years, I'm willing to bet that $10 a year is $10 for every year of service is not that big of a deal. And I'm not saying that because that's what I would charge, and one of the things that I do in my presentations is I'm not here to self-promote. I want you to use the arts. I'm not every art. There's thousands of artists in the country, use them. But that mindset, I think, would start rebuilding that broken column, as we say.
Yeah, that's interesting. My lodge has a set of the building has a set of Masonic illustrations that are quite old, and at some point in the distant past, somebody decided to try to preserve them by shellacking over them.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and so the shellacking has
Shellacking.
the shellacking
Shellacking.
has shellacked them. It's turned them from full bright color to tones of brown.
Yep.
And one of them in particular became very difficult for the candidate to discern the difference between the illustration and a brown panel. And so we started talking about what we could do, and it turns out we have this very talented painter who is a member of the lodge.
There you go.
And so he generously volunteered his services. I don't know if he was paid anything or if it was completely a gift, but he did a painting of the Virgin weeping for us. And now our lodge has something that's absolutely unique.
Yes.
To that building. No one else has that illustration done quite that way.
So in my travels, I've seen a lot of lodges like that, where they have one aspect of ritual that's been done for their lodge. I've been in Massachusetts, for example, as you mentioned. I've been to the lodge in Lexington, Massachusetts, and someone actually made this diorama of all the orders of architecture.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to see a middle chamber lecture in there, and to no one's surprise, when they get to something that is theirs, that part of ritual becomes even better. Like you can sense a sense of pride in when they're delivering that, because they're doing something that's theirs. It's meaningful. I mean, there is a reason why we use trestle boards. It's to accent the ritual. Every piece of ritual that we can do can be done without visual aids. But if you have trestle boards, or if you have any visual representation,
trestle boards.
Hmm?
If you have good trestle boards.
Yeah, I heard some Grand Lodge, I'm not going to mention its name, Massachusetts, that decided to tell everybody to buy all of the same trestle boards and overcharge them. But that wasn't a good day for me when I heard that. But anyway, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that was done so to be charitable.
Mm-hmm.
It was done with the best of intentions, but I think the worst of executions.
Yeah.
And the word went out that every building had to have a set of those. But if you had something different that served the same purpose, you could use it. But of course, nobody heard that. Everybody just heard you have to buy these. And so everybody has those. And I think they are, it is one of those things that's observed to the letter, but not in spirit.
Mm-hmm.
because people don't like them.
Well,
in a lot of lodges.
There's uniformity, and I think that Masonry on the whole is against uniformity. It's about personalization through your journey. There's nowhere in our ritual where it says you have to do this and do this alone. It leads you to certain areas. We have requirements to move up, but it doesn't say that you have to live. You have to eat this. You have to sleep now. It doesn't put specifics in there. It says you have to study the liberal arts and sciences. It doesn't tell you how, because everybody learns a different way. I mean, I learned the middle chamber lecture by drawing it. That's how it sunk into my head. And I'm sure there's other people out there. I know people who memorize to music. They literally hum their ritual out because they're so musically inclined. And that makes it different. So I keep telling that brother, by the way, and hopefully he sees this, that he needs to put it to music so that he can do something, because it would be unbelievably special. But
I'd love to see a chanted middle chamber. Sorry, High Church Episcopalian.
Yeah, I was gonna say. It's like, and you're gonna
I
be
was
like,
thinking
oh.
of Pink Floyd personally, but that's cool.
So, how did you get started painting all this? I know you've studied in Florence, Italy. Was that before you were a Mason? After? Like, how did paint us a timeline?
That was before I was a Mason. Yeah, I see what you did there. That was before I was a Mason. So I studied in 2006. I became a Mason in 2010. But those studies kind of put me on the track for it. One of the things that I studied over there was, get ready for this, 15th and 16th century Italian architecture. Yeah, you're excited. But what I did learn about was how the stonemasons guilds operated, and I actually got to see how the geometry and the symbolism was put into the buildings, and it kind of sparked my interest. And then a couple of years passed, and I saw a reference in a book about French architecture that I was reading, and I was like, oh, Freemasons, okay. And got a little interested in it, did some research, and then reached out to my lodge, and rest is history. I didn't do any Masonic art until 2012, when we had these old shuttered windows in our lodge that we decided that we were going to put faux stained glass windows in. They had hired someone else to come up with a design, and that person was not a Mason. It was just a simple geometric pattern. There was nothing special about it. And I went up to the people in charge and I was like, no, stop. So they gave me a crazy deadline of 6 weeks to get something together. And I went to town, and that's where I came up with my Nashua stained glass windows designs, which I used all kinds of sacred geometry and Masonic symbolism. Most of it I didn't even understand at the time, because I'd only been a master mason for like 16 months. So I look up and I'm picking it apart every time I see it. Even got one of the lodges in the building's number wrong, which I still hear every day. But that kind of started it off, because once I did that, I couldn't believe how much of like an overnight sensation it was. Like a week and a half after a little article was written about me, I was getting calls from like Masons in Greece complimenting on it. And I didn't know what to do. So I said, all right, there's kind of a need for it. So I did my Codex series next, and that went crazy. And it kind of just spiraled out of there. After that, I started doing patents, because, you go through this degree and it says this is the greatest honor of your life and you should cherish this. This is like one of the greatest achievements. Here's a photocopy of a photocopy with the lodge name spelled wrong. Congratulations. And I said, well, we need to do something better than that. So in my studies in art history, I learned about illuminated documents, which are handwritten documents which have gold and precious metals actually laid into it. So it's called illuminated because it looks like it glows when the light hits it. So I always wanted to make them. So I started. And I knew that by doing them by hand, no one would be able to afford them, because it's an ungodly expensive to do one. I've only done 3 like real ones. So I kind of came up with a very high-end print version of it where I draw them on my tablet, print them off G clay so they last 100 years in sunlight, and then put the gold into that. And they went crazy too. So not crazy enough where it would be a full-time job. And I made the decision very early that I didn't want to do that. And that kind of led me eventually into getting back into painting. And that's where I am now. I'm almost trying to hush away the patents unless they're commissions to do more paintings, because I've done some of my best work, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years through oil paintings. And I used to be a landscape artist before this, and now I'm doing full-on portraits of people. So,
And you're also going to lodges and painting rooms.
yeah, that was the big one. Blackmer Lodge in North Carolina. That's been my masterpiece so far. So my buddy down there, Ben Wallace, if you haven't met him, meet him. He's awesome. He's one of those guys that just gets masonry and knows how to teach people through both lectures and life. So he called me up. Well, I went down to speak at one of his lodges, and he, while he was there, he goes like, "Hey, you mind taking a little side trip?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, you're driving me around. We're going where you're telling me." So he brought me to Blackmer Lodge, which is this. It was, a little lodge in what I consider the middle of nowhere, and we're sitting in the room, and it's the classic wood paneling, and like circa 1973. And he goes, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a nice little lodge. And I heard you guys got a good group." He's like, "Yeah, we do." He's like, "The walls suck, don't they?" Like, "Yeah, they could use an upgrade." He's like, "You want to mural them?" And I kind of dropped, and I said, "Yeah." And he kind of said, like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I have no idea yet."
I don't know. We arrived like 5 minutes ago. I mean,
so he gave me a couple of weeks to just come up with a concept, and he trusted me enough to say, like, "Do what you want. Like, we know you know what you're talking about." So I had been doing some research on the Sistine Chapel for a presentation that I was doing, and one of the things that stuck in my mind is Sistine Chapel ceiling was commissioned to be the greatest work of Christian art, but there's no Christian figures in it. Michelangelo did what he wanted to do, and no one could stop him. So I came up with this idea of, all right, I'm going to do a gigantic Masonic mural, but I'm not going to put any Masonic symbolism in it. Like, no, Hiram Abiff is not going to be in there. And the way I kind of figured it out is I broke it down to the esoteric meanings of Freemasonry, like the sources, so Kabbalah, alchemy, Judeo-Christian teachings. And then I went back through my research on something that I'm working on now and wanted to incorporate the Renaissance into it, because I firmly believe that what we call Freemasonry is a continuation of Renaissance philosophy. There's too many connections. We can get into that in a whole other episode if you want. But one of the few places where we actually have reference of a stone mason yard teaching philosophy that is still taught in Freemasonry today happened in a church called San Marco in Florence, and it happened in this courtyard. So I recreated the courtyard in the temple, and then made these different niches on each wall, and each wall had a different theme to it. So it would be like charity or knowledge of spirituality and stuff like that. And I put very specific colors into each of them, because when you look down on it from above, the colors and the lines and where everybody's pointing their fingers and stuff actually form a gigantic Kabbalic tree of life.
what?
And all the figures that are surrounding these medallions are representations of each of the Sephiroths. And then I tied Masonic symbols into that. So, we have like Noah and Moses, but they're pointing to something that has something to do with Euclid. And so, yeah, I took about 7 months of planning to get that done. When I showed Ben, he was just like, "Oh, yeah." Yeah, that's good. So I had a great team of assistants, 2 ladies who lived down there. And I sent down all my full-size sketches. They projected them on the walls, got me ready, and then I went down for 72 hours. I painted it. I have a new job, so I don't have a lot of vacation time. So I had to paint as quickly as possible. But in 3 days, I did 3 16-hour days and just went to town, going nuts painting in there. But when it came out, it was awesome. They actually ended up buying a copy of one of my rose windows and put it in the in the north as well. And then they went to town too, because they had been saving up for this huge renovation. So the flat roof was cut open and they did a barrel vault and put thousands of LED lights in it and mapped it to the night where their lodge was formed. So when you're kneeling at the altar and you look up, you see the sky on the night the lodge was founded. And that's not this renovation. You have to go to this lodge. They bought doors that they don't know how old they were, but they were from Egypt, and worked them into the building. It's nuts, and it was all just saving money.
In which lodge?
This is Blackmer Lodge in I want to say, it's not Troy. Mount Gilead, North Carolina.
Mount Gilead.
Yeah.
Road trip.
Road trip. On the next episode of Three Distinct Knowledge.
So yeah, when I was done with that, I kind of like took a step back. Well, actually, I didn't really take a step back, because I literally put the brush in the brush cleaner and said see ya, and was rushed to the airport. And then I slept on the plane. But I got back and I looked at the photos and I was just like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. So of all the work that I've done so far, that one's untouched.
I think, you bring up something that is one of my pet themes, which is these brothers saved up money and they spent it on their lodge, making their lodge a special, unique place for them, as opposed to spending money on profane charity, trying to buy the love of the profane world. I have no problem with Masons being generous, but I think we also have a responsibility to maintain our buildings, to maintain our regalia, to maintain the quality of the presentation that we make to candidates through the physical stuff that we use.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of places let that go. The number of lodges that I've walked into where it's obvious that there was glory there once, but it has been a long time since anyone gave a damn. It's really depressing. So I love hearing about stuff like that.
Well, just to continue on that, so I flew back down for an grand opening, a rededication of the lodge, I guess you could say. And when I arrived, there was an article in the newspaper, and the mayor was coming, I think. And I could barely walk into that room because so many people had come to go in. I mean, think of a lodge room. I'm not talking the chairs filled. I'm talking about 3 rows of folding chairs in the room, so there's room for one person to walk around the altar. That's how packed it was. So arts is also a gigantic advertisement, and it's not an advertisement at the same time, which makes it even better, because I am firmly against any sort of advertising for the craft. I don't like billboards. I don't like radio ads. I think people should come on their own free will and accord, and that we should be advertising through our works and our image rather than paying for someone else to talk about how great we are. So when you incorporate the arts, it's really an advertisement. And if you do it correctly, and if you put quality work into your lodge, you're going to get noticed.
I think the best advertisement for the fraternity is always the mystique. And the arts can provide that in a way that nothing else can.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a beautiful building that shows the care has been lavished on it, and you have all the Masonic symbolism on it, it will attract people. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have a dumpy building, you can have the best ritual in the world, but if your building is dumpy on the outside, nobody will know that what happens in there is important.
Well, I think so. I agree to a point. I know of many lodges that just they don't have the money, they don't have the spot there, and even though they're in buildings that are, I won't say dilapidated, but are in dire need of a facelift, some of them are just unbelievable lodges to go into.
Yeah.
So
In those cases,
that's the catch-22 with the arts, because I go around and I say how important it is, but it's not the only thing that's important. One of the things I run into all the time, and to some point I agree with them, but there's definitely if I can't have it, nobody can mentality with a lot of Masons, is immediately after some of my presentations, they'll say, well, the lodge isn't the building. I'm like, no, it's not. And I'm not saying that, but it's an amplifier is the best way I can word it. If you've ever been in a lodge that is just unbelievably ornate or unbelievably taken care of, you realize the level of Masonry changes. And case in point, if you ever make it to Philadelphia, if you ever get to sit in the Philadelphia temple and be in a ritual or be in a degree or witness a degree, you feel like a different level of Mason just because of where you are. But that's like I said, it's the catch-22. I think it's imperative, but at the same time, it isn't. It's weird.
No, I think it is imperative. I just think it's not always immediately imperative. But if you are meeting in a dilapidated building, even if you're a good lodge, at some point that building is going to fall down around your ears and you're not going to have a place to meet.
Yep, I agree.
And I think too often we're too shy about asking our members to donate their money and their time and their talent to the lodge outside of the meeting. I had a conversation a while back with one of the members of the board of directors of our hall association. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in the Cambridge building, but it was built 100 years ago. It's a beautiful brick building. It's a gorgeous building. It's not the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, but it's a gorgeous building. And it needed some carpentry work done. And they were complaining about how expensive it was going to be. And I was like, you have a brother who's a carpenter. And he's having a tough time paying his dues. I bet you he'd be glad to exchange a couple of hours of carpentry to have his dues waived. It'd be a deal for the lodge and a deal for him. Why don't we do things like that more often?
Yeah, that in that situation, I completely agree. It's irresponsible for any lodge to put themselves in a position like that. You are stewards of Masonry, and you are stewards of Masonry's image. So if you're in a position where your dues can't pay the bills, raise your dues. If you're in a lodge where they don't think that paying your dues is that important, I suggest going to a different lodge. And I'm a firm believer in lodge migration, which has caused quite a few headaches for me by saying that out loud, but I'll say it.
I tell guys all the time, if you're not getting what you thought you should get out of Freemasonry and you see a place where you can find that, go.
Yeah.
Go.
My advice for any young Mason is find a place that will allow you to grow. Even if you're in an amazing lodge where there's 100 people on the sidelines every time, and you go to lodge and you're locked in and you feel like you are kind of imprisoned in what you're doing, or you're not allowed to explore, or you're not allowed to ask questions, you're in the wrong lodge. And there's a lot of lodges that I've been to where I know questions aren't asked because there's no answers. They've gotten to a place where they just don't know anymore. And it sounds really uptight and mean, but some lodges deserve to turn in their charter. It's a really harsh thing when it's your lodge. My lodge almost turned in its charter a couple of years before I was there, and thank God we kind of bounced back, and now we're doing a lot better. We're not thriving, but we're growing and getting better every year. So if you're in a place where you're allowed to put in the work, despite what any kind of work that is, like mine's the arts. I do art for my lodge. That's how I better it. There's people who are great at, you know, carpentry. They built a chamber of reflection in our lodge. So it's just any way that you can use your talents, wherewith God has blessed you, to to better the lodge. That's what you should be looking for, and that's the fortuitous thing about me being a Masonic artist is I was put in a lodge where I was pushed very quickly to help through my talents. And then the best thing they kind of do for me with my art is, and it sounds weird, is kind of like get out of the way. Just trust me and let me do my thing. And for an artist, that's amazing. So
I have a friend who is an Episcopal priest. Well, I have more than one friend, but who's an Episcopal priest. And her specialty over the years has been revitalizing congregations that are failing. And I think there's a lot of similarities. Someday we're going to do a 3 distinct knocks with Masons who are also ministers of one form or another, and talk about the similarities between making a congregation thrive and making a lodge thrive, because I think there are a lot of similarities and we can learn from each other. But she said at one point that one of her secrets was the first time someone came to church, she welcomed them, learned their name, and made a point of following up with them and saying that she was glad that they came. Next time they came to church, she called them by name and asked them if they would mind helping with X or Y the next Sunday. Because if she could give them a job to do, then they had to come back.
Yeah.
And then, but by the time they were done doing that job, coming was a habit. And she had them. And she said that was the big secret to a lot of her success in turning congregations around, was simply that. And I think a lot of lodges don't think about the new guy coming in and what talents he might be able to contribute outside of being an officer. You know, we're all very quick to say, oh, well, all the officers are full, done. But, you know, you may have a musician who can contribute music during a degree. You may have an artist who can paint your wall. You may have, and finding everybody a little job to do so that they have to come back is something that I think is very important. Your lodge just may have been clever at recruiting.
No, I can't agree with you more on that. You know, we have an EA right now who's a guitarist and loves music, and I'm trying to get something together for him to show him what's in the magic flute.
All right.
And be like, all right, you want to see something cool? Like, all right, look at this stuff. And I was in a lodge, which I'm now an honorary member of, and I was about to do my art appreciation presentation for them, and I realized that they were heavy into music. Like that was their big thing. They had a musician, they played music during the degree. So on the spot, when I heard it, I said, all right, I'm changing this. We're starting late. We're going to listen to the opening overture of the Magic Flute. And then I said, all right, about 4 minutes in, I want you to listen to 3 chords. And they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, those 3 chords are him knocking at his lodge. And it was just like, okay. And everybody came up to me and was telling me after, like, that was amazing. And I'm like, well, I didn't really do anything except give you the opportunity to hear this.
Yeah.
And that goes with any lodge or member of the lodge. You just got to find that way of getting a hold of them and motivating them to not only be a part of, but contribute. That's the word you said is perfect.
Yeah. I do. When I was in college, I was forced at gunpoint to translate parts of Vitruvius.
No.
And it was a miserable experience. Have you ever read Vitruvius?
The 10 Books of Architecture?
Yeah.
I haven't read there. I unfortunately have read about 3/4 of it through, but it's more of a reference point than a read.
Yeah. Well, try translating him.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's all, you know, the length of this is proportional to the height of that divided by the, and it's not, it's not natural language
Right.
to translate, so it's a pain in the neck. But I learned a lot from doing that. The core of what I learned is that Vitruvius believed that temples should be representations of the human body, as the human body and the temple represented what was above. That was his. So he's obsessed with proportions of the body being part of the temple. Then you have the Vitruvian Man, which everybody has seen. And it shows up in the middle chamber lecture, the best part of Freemasonry.
The worst part of Freemasonry. I hate the fellowcraft degree.
He doesn't, because he doesn't understand it.
I don't like it because I'm a millennial and I can't pay attention for 6 hours and go through the middle chamber lecture.
Can we make you some visual aids?
No. And then you have the candidate that looks like he saw a ghost and he's like, so it was the Greeks? What are we talking about?
So one of the things as master is I get the last word. So after the fellowcraft degree, one of the things I say to the guys is like, hey, how much of what you just heard did you learn in middle school? Like, okay, orders of architecture, the 5 senses, you should know this. So there's got to be something more, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I bring them over to the pillars and I stand them right in the middle of the pillars. And I go, okay, we have, one has the sky, one has the ground, and then we mentioned that it's inundation and conflagration. Earth, fire, wind, water. And you're standing in the middle. What does that represent? And then I tell them a little bit about the ether and how it's the holy part. And I'm like, that's what the middle chamber is about. Go figure it out.
Why can't you explain it like him? Like 6 books to read. I'm moving, so everything looks terrible. Excuse me.
Because
he's pointing to all 6 books.
The words in that book are so long. I am exhausted. Like 3 sentences in, it's like equally.
One of the things that I enjoy doing is after the middle chamber lecture, I do a walkthrough with candidates when they come back for candidate education. I do a little walkthrough with them, or I used to when I did candidate education for my lodge. And my favorite line of walking them through, well, first, I like pointing out to them that the definition of geometry that they're given is a direct translated quote from Plotinus of Alexandria. And he's talking about how God made the universe. He's not talking about geometry at all. And that ancient philosopher, the first of the Neoplatonists, talking about how God made the universe, if you lay his explanation right next to a modern theoretical physicist's, they look really similar. And then the second thing I like to point out to them is, did you ever think that there was a moral dimension to geometry? And I don't think I've ever had a candidate say, yeah, I totally thought there was a moral dimension to geometry.
Very moral. Yeah, no, it's I just because technically I'm a millennial, damn it. I love the middle chamber lecture because I like symbolism. So I love the fellowcraft degree and I like talking to people after it. But I think the way I kind of describe it to people is I don't get into details. I just kind of try to get the themes of each kind of little section that's going on there. I bored him already just talking about the middle chamber. But yeah, it's one of those things that I want you to understand the words first, and then when you're ready to dig deeper, I give them the opportunity to. And if we really need it, it's come over to my house, get on my porch. We're getting the scotch and scars out.
Yeah, I think my approach to candidate education has always been give them enough that it gets everyone hooked at some point. And my claim is that if I can get every candidate to read one book about something related to Freemasonry, whether it's history or symbolism or philosophy, I don't care. But if I can get them to read one book after their Master Mason degree, then I've been successful and they're on their own after that. But and you know, for the most part, I think if you take the time to candidates to explain to them why things are interesting, then they will find them interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you pour the fire hose at them and forget to tell them why bits of the spray are meant to be interesting that they lose.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because it's that kind of mentality is what I pride myself in my art, because as a student of the Renaissance, I've been trying to train myself for quite some time how to think like a Renaissance artist, how to put symbolism in both subtle and very in-your-face ways. And when I usually do a painting, every aspect of it has a different meaning. Whether you know, my John the Baptist, he's pointing his finger, and everybody looks at his finger, but no one's ever looked at it and said, what is he pointing to? Because he's pointing to something. And what does that mean? And how does that go into Freemasonry? Or when I did my ruffians painting, why are those flowers there? They all have meaning, and they all have symbolism attached to it. And just like Freemasonry, and actually all art, well, all good art, I guess you could say, there's levels. Like you can view something and see it at its face value, and then you can view it as the term I use in my presentations is through the initiated eye, and kind of see the deeper, real meaning of the painting. The example that I always use is Washington crossing the Delaware. Okay, yeah, what is, you know, and I'll start the process off like, what do you see? You see a guy in a boat going that way, and they're about to attack, Battle of Trenton on Christmas, all that stuff. Everybody tells me all the historical parts, and then I go, well, how many people in the boat? There's 12. There's 13. What could that mean? All right, why are they all dressed differently? Why is there a slave in the boat? There was no slave in this boat. So, and then I work into, all right, we're actually looking at a presentation of George Washington with America going against the current and bringing America into the forefront of history. And we get into that whole discussion. And that's the same way we need to look at ritual. And the arts historically have been an amazing tool to do that with. And that's why, another reason why we need to get it back in. Even if we're just talking about music or art or, a play or anything, if you have discussions about art, even if it's not Masonic in Lodge, you're going to train your mind how to think symbolically. And that is key to understanding Freemasonry. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's the reason why so many of the men who are historical great patrons of the craft back in the day when, you had great patrons of things, were men who were also great patrons of the arts, is because of that attached, that idea that it means something, that there's symbolism there that requires thinking. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but I agree wholeheartedly. It's also, it's why I love the idea of Masons going to arts events as well. I'd love the idea of seeing, for a whole variety of reasons, of seeing a lodge show up for, a presentation of the magic flute as a lodge.
Yeah. There's other way. It's also a bonding experience too. So I used to once a year take high school students to an art museum, and one of my favorite things I got to do was, and this would be a small group, there'd only be like 10 or 12 of them. So I would meet them in the middle of the MFA in Boston, and I say, all right, give them a general overview of where things are, and I send everybody off, and I send them in different directions, and I tell them to find a painting or a work of art that speaks to them. Then we all meet back in like an hour, and then we go to all 12 of them, and we have the rest of the class explain why that person liked it. And
that's good.
Not allowed to talk about it. And then what happens is that it's amazing thing is you never hear, oh, the colors are cool. Unless, you know, you're seeing a Monet or something that's impressionist, what color is it? But you start all of a sudden digging deep into paintings. Well, I like how it's talking about this, and it just opens up that symbolic part of your mind. And Masons need to do that. If kids can do it, I'm pretty sure grown men can do it. Most of them. But you can do that in lodge too. Even if it's a work of, you know, a piece of music. Yeah, one of the presentations I do is I bring in Dark Side of the Moon, and I let them listen to one song on it and say, like, how does this tie into Masonry? And usually it starts off with nobody, and then one guy will say something. Well, it's really about mortality. Ah, okay. So what is he saying about mortality? And then you kind of it grows from that, and it's kind of the same preference, because once that door is opened, it's a floodgate. So again, another reason I try to get the idea of the arts as a learning tool for Masons into people's minds as much as I can.
Yeah, I think, and you know, it gives people access to an entirely different way of approaching the world, which I think is a genuine gift that the craft can offer. And with the cutbacks, you know, on my soapbox for a moment, but with the cutbacks for arts and public schools, fewer and fewer kids are getting kind of any education in how to approach that kind of thing. You know, and English classes are more about technical writing now than they are about literature. So again, they're being cut off from access to an education in how to approach symbolism.
They're also being cut from being able to interpret things freely and be open to other people's interpretations. And when you don't have that ability, you have Facebook. I mean that. It's a group of people who don't know how to be around other people, so they resort to going on a computer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about a lodge is that you have people who have different symbol sets that they're working with. You have people who come out of a Jewish tradition, people who come out of a Christian tradition, people who come out of Muslim. In my lodge, my mother lodge, it's a little bit of everything. Broad spectrum of it. And because we're a Cambridge lodge, we have a number of guys who've been to divinity school somewhere, or who have extensive education in one field or another that's given them a broad view of philosophy. And so the conversations can get really complicated really fast. But what's interesting is that what we often my friend Brendan and I, for a number of years, found ourselves constantly at odds in agreement, because the symbol sets that we used were so different. Our ways of talking about things were so different that it was really hard for us to figure out that we were trying to express the same thing. But a lodge puts you in a relationship with guys for long enough that you get to find that out eventually. And it really expands your ability to approach someone else's language with the desire for understanding, to incorporate that so that you have a better understanding of your own symbol set.
Yep.
So if somebody wanted to commission something from you, say painting a lodge room, or repainting the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, say.
Yeah, okay.
I know we have a couple of Pennsylvania listeners. Where would they contact you?
In there. You guys need to freshen it up. Pro pillows or something.
That's your problem with the membership. It needs to be repainted. That'll get the guys in there.
So where would they find you?
Well, usually they would find me on my website, but I had a massive issue with my website, and it's currently completely down. The best way to reach me is through my Facebook page right now, which is just Ryan J. Flynn Artist. Pretty easy to find me. My website, ryanjflynn.com, will be up soon. I'm trying to figure out where everything went wrong. And it's going through a massive redesign too. I used to have a store that was basically click here, buy a print and stuff like that. I got sales out of it. I got some stuff, but I started going down that path that I didn't want to go through, where I'm being a merchandiser. And again, I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just not what I want to do.
Yeah, but you make things that A, nobody else makes. B, they're amazing. I mean, they're not like square and compass on a pair of socks type thing.
Damn it, you saw that.
They're actually really, I know you own a pair.
Do you have a pair of square and compass socks?
That's not the point of what I'm trying to say. And you give guys, like you said, they get the copied of a copied piece of paper and like some squiggly lines, and you have like these beautiful works of art that people could hang up and be like, that is what I joined.
So I know what you're saying there. So I'm not stepping away from it, but I got too cookie cutter, if that's the best way to put it. I still want to do them. I just want to make sure that everybody's getting something special. So I will still do patents for people. I'm working on my 5 right now. But what I don't want to end up doing is what I started to do, which is making patents that are blank so you can fill in your own names, because now I can knock $50 off because I don't have to print them individually. That's the path that I want to go down. If someone has something from me, I want them to consider it a work of art.
Yeah. Now, the grand bodies in Massachusetts all actually, the York Rite, it's interesting. So the Grand Lodge has a beautiful patent form that's been used for a long time, and it's, calligraphy fills in your, and everybody pretty much uses the same calligraphy place, fills in your name and stuff, and it's an impressive looking document. And the York Rite for a long time wasn't issuing them, and then they found the plates that they used to use.
Oh, really?
And so they dusted them off and took them to a printer and got the printer to make patents for them. And now they're issuing them again. And they're very impressive. They're really nice. And they're unique to each body and for the past presiding officer for each. And they're really nice. So I think there's bodies that are doing that kind of work already. What you're offering is something completely different. It's individualized. It's a one-off. It's not necessarily the thing that you would get when you're raised. It's a thing that you might get for someone for their 25th anniversary as a Mason instead. And I think that that's a really nice alternative. It's a completely different business, as it were.
Yeah, it's to be completely frank, it's not a business that would keep anybody in business.
Yeah.
I get a 5-to-1 ratio of people complaining about prices than people buying, and most of the time I'm underpaying myself when I do these things. I just kind of do it for the love of the craft. But what I'm really trying to get into now is commissions and portraits and stuff, because having been there and being the faces of people who are unveiled when they have a surprise oil portrait of them for their lodge forever, it's really special. And my favorite memories in Masonry so far have been revolved around my art, but revolved around originals. My favorite memory in my history of being a Freemason was so the windows that I designed for our lodge have backlights, so that when we turn off all the lights in the lodge, they're actually still lit up. So the first time we did an EA degree, and that person hadn't been in the lodge room, and he was brought to light in the manner in which we do it, which is probably the exact same way that you do it. Seeing the look on his face when he looked up and saw those, I like teared up. That's what I want to keep doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And portraits I like because they're personal. There's a lot of work that goes into them. I paint in a very old style. And I do see the need for them because, for example, I think any lodge that has a member of their lodge that makes it all the way to Grand Master should have a portrait of that person in their lodge. That's a lot of work. That's a lifetime of dedication. You know, getting a photo done of it is one thing, but show them that you really care. That's just my personal thing. But there's other things, you know, like my Ruffians commission. I heard that people were shocked by it, like how much they loved it. And the voicemail I got from the guy who commissioned it after he opened it was pretty awesome. Like how much. But that's really what I'm trying to stay with. I think there's a level of meaning there that I don't want to say alone in with Freemasonry, but there's very few of us right now. And I want to stay in that as opposed to the high-end merchandise. Because there's some fantastic high-end merchandise out there where you can definitely tell that the people care. I want to set my bar a little higher. And I say that by hopefully not offending anybody. It's because I have the utmost respect for those guys. It's just not what I want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Cambridge building has a foyer before like a lot of Masonic buildings, there's a foyer before the lodge room. And the tradition in the building is that to hang portraits of men who've made a significant contribution to Freemasonry in Cambridge. And so there's a picture of Endicott, who became Grand Master, as a member of my mother lodge. There's a portrait of him that's very impressive and large. He was a large man, so they had to do a large portrait just to get that
wide.
And you know, there's a number of portraits up there, but then you see the shift towards photographs. And by comparison, the photographs, it's funny because the photographs are a more literal representation of the individual, but somehow they convey less information. It's always the portraits, the paintings that catch your eye.
I'm going to do an obscure movie reference here. I hope to God one of you gets this. But have you ever seen DCU? There's a shot where they're in a fraternity, and it starts off and there's all the people in like their regalia, and you know it's a college fraternity. They're all dressed to the nines, and then they go to the next one, and it slowly deteriorates down the wall. And at the end of the wall, it's just a Polaroid stuck with gum onto the wall. So that's a good thing that I see, and what you say, I see it everywhere. So
what's nice though is that my lodge did recently, 6-7 more years ago, did commission a portrait of one of the guys, and they did it deliberately, thinking, we used to do this. This is what we used to do when a guy, did something outstanding for Cambridge Freemasonry. This is how we said thank you, and then he became immortal in a sense and being hung there forever. So they went out and they found a portrait artist and had a painting done, and then rather cruelly, we found the absolute worst photo of him that you could imagine. He's all sweaty and red, and we had that blown up to poster size and put in a frame.
Oh, nice.
Cheap. Yeah. And then we unveiled that, told him that was what we were getting.
Nice.
It was not nice.
I would have signed it. I totally would have signed it.
And tried to get him to be gracious, watching him trying to find something gracious to say about that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Can't get too far.
And then we showed him the real thing.
I'm going to have to remember that. I'm going to have to do that to one unveiling once.
God, it was so funny.
You should do that. When somebody orders something, like ship it out on a Monday and just be like Crayola crayon coloring it in. And then on Tuesday, like they get the real thing. They're like, thanks.
It's an original.
It's original.
Remember, you asked if I could do this for $20?
Yeah.
This is what you get for $20.
I am Mason.
Hiram.
Yeah.
It's Hiram.
Well, Nick, do you have anything else?
I don't think so.
I think we've taken enough of Ryan's time.
Yeah.
He has painting to do.
Do I? No, not tonight. I got to working on a website for a company that helps kids with social issues. So doing some illustrations for them tonight.
That is also good work.
Oh, you know you've been started live streaming your painting.
Yeah, that's just to prove that I do it.
Was there a question?
Well, I mean it's paint by numbers. Like
Yeah. The trick is put the camera far back enough where you can't see the numbers.
you can't see the numbers, but he's
Why are you always 20 feet away?
yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
the
watched it for all 20
magic.
straight
Yeah.
hours.
What'd you say?
I watched it for the entire 22 hours that you streamed it.
And yet he can't get through the middle chamber lecture.
It is too long.
No, it's not long enough. It's been cut.
So
it should be cut.
Yeah.
It's a whole paragraph on each of the liberal arts.
my senior steward is a member of a lodge in Rhode Island, and they do the absolute full Prestonian version of it, which is like I think you said it was like 27 minutes or something like that. So
Are you serious?
yeah.
They should be brought up
So
on.
what you're listening to is the in Florida, I know, is the chopped down version.
First of all, there's nothing cut about what I've had to listen to, and not in Florida. I'm not saying we don't say which Grand Lodge, anything. I've been in many lodges across the world for the middle chamber lecture. No.
So stop it. Stephen, who's in my lodge, when in Rhode Island, they give him the option. You can learn the short one or the long one, and he manned up. So naturally, I'm just abusing that knowledge in the lodge right now. So he's going to be at our October stated, and we're going to listen to it one more time.
I think that's a great
I
idea.
think that's a terrible idea.
Let's road trip. October, you
Okay.
said?
Yeah.
Wait. I'll road trip to see the lodge room he did, but I mean, when the middle chamber comes, I gotta go to the bathroom. Like, I got an issue with doctor. I got a receipt from a doctor or something.
A receipt from a doctor.
Yeah, because I would have had to pay for it. All right. So they know where to find you on Facebook. Thank you for coming on and talk to us. Anything else you want us to know? How to get in touch with you? Anything like that?
Yeah, this was fun. I like this. If they need to find me, Facebook is definitely the easiest way to do it right now. RyanJFlynn.com will be back in a new and improved manner, hopefully, if I can do that.
In a new, improved, and uncrashed manner.
Yeah, right. My email might work. Go fig.
Do you want to do the closing?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, that has been 3 distinct knocks for another episode. The fantastic photography on our website is courtesy of Brother Aaron Sherman. My script just went away.
Keep going. Actually, just start over. I'll just cut this out. It's not working. Okay.
What are you doing?
We got the new Patreons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. People who give us money deserve thank yous. That's absolutely true. Okay. There we go.
There we go.
All right.
You guys are really good at what you do.
That has been 3 distinct knocks for another episode. Thank you, Brother Flynn, for spending time with us. And we also thank Brother Aaron Sherman for the fantastic photography on our website. Our theme song, which Nick will remember to include this time, is composed by Worshipful Christopher Duggan. Original composition, original art. Go for that.
Still not done.
Our website is made, yeah, well, it's never done if Duggan's doing it. Our website is maintained, curated, and lovingly tended by Brother Nicholas Harvey. Essential canine supervision for this episode is provided by Zach, I think.
Zach and Flula.
Falula is in the other room, though. The opinions expressed in this podcast on our website are those of the individual contributors and do not represent the opinions of any lodge, Grand Lodge, or other Masonic body. We are deeply grateful to our Patreon sponsors, who are Charles Ward, Bill Stutter, Adam Roth, Amicable Lodge, Jacob Savlik, Arthur, oh, not again. If he would write us and tell us how to say his
No,
name,
we got in touch with him.
We did?
Yes.
And what did he say? How
he
we
says
say
he's not going to tell us.
he's not because he
He
likes
enjoys it every time.
All right. Arthur not going to tell us. Patrick Harvey, Christopher Patty, and our newest Patreon, Masonic Revival, and our newest Patreon sponsor, David Vogel. Thank you all very much for your support of Three Distinct Knocks. Please visit our website at threedistinctknocks.org. I'm David Riley, and I'm incredibly thankful for the brothers that have made this podcast and my Masonic journey so rich, interesting, challenging, and fulfilling. I hope Three Distinct Knocks has helped you make some daily progress in Freemasonry. Thank you for listening.